You're watching Epic Wealth and History. Every Tuesday and Friday, we uncover the histories they tried to bury.
The world held its breath. It was the spring of 1453, and the air over the great city was thick with more than just the scent of the sea. It was heavy with the weight of 2,000 years of history, with the prayers of a dying empire, and with the ominous drumbeat of an army that had come to erase it all from the map. This was Constantinople, the new Rome, the impregnable bastion of Christendom. For a millennium, its colossal walls had repelled every invader, every barbarian horde, every ambitious conqueror. But now, a new power was at the gates, led by a young, brilliant, and utterly determined sultan who would not be denied. This is not just the story of a siege. This is the story of the day the medieval world ended and the modern age began. The stage was set by an empire on life support. By the 15th century, the Byzantine Empire was a ghost of its former glory, a pale reflection of the Roman might that once stretched from Britain to the Euphrates. Its territory had shrunk to little more than the city itself and a few scattered outposts. The mighty Theodosian walls, a triple-layered masterpiece of military engineering, now guarded a city pockmarked with empty fields and ruined palaces, its population a fraction of what it once was. Yet, within those decaying splendor, the Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos held on to a desperate hope. He was the last in a long line of Caesars, a man burdened by the impossible task of saving a patient that was already clinically dead. From the east came the shadow. Mehmed II, only 21 years old, was consumed by a single ambition, a prophecy he was determined to fulfill. He was not just another Ottoman ruler. He was a scholar of history, a student of warfare, and a man who saw himself as the heir to Alexander the Great and the Roman emperors. To him, Constantinople was the ultimate prize, the red apple of legend that would grant him untold power and legitimacy. He understood that its fall would make him not just a sultan, but Kaiser Iram, the Caesar of Rome. He spent months preparing, assembling an army of over 80,000 men, including the elite janissaries, and overseeing the construction of a fortress on the European side of the Bosporus to strangle the city's supply lines. The key to the siege, however, was not just men, but a monster. Mehmed had acquired a Hungarian engineer named Orban, who promised to build a weapon of unimaginable power. The result was a cannon of such colossal proportions that it took 60 oxen and hundreds of men to transport it. Its stone cannonballs, weighing over half a ton, could reduce the ancient walls to dust. When this beast was test-fired, a chronicler wrote that the sound was heard 100 miles away, and the projectile buried itself 6 feet into the ground. The age of the castle wall was over, and the age of gunpowder had arrived with a thunderous roar. As the Ottoman noose tightened, the defenders could only watch and pray. Constantine XI, with perhaps 7,000 men to guard miles of walls, made a final, desperate appeal to the West. But the Christian kingdoms of Europe, weary from their own wars and still bitter over the schism between the Eastern and Western churches, sent only a trickle of help. A handful of Genoese and Venetian sailors, led by the brilliant Genoese condottiero Giovanni Giustiniani Longo, stood with the Byzantines. The city's fate would rest on the courage of these few and on the strength of walls that had never been breached. For nearly 7 weeks, the city held. The great chain across the Golden Horn kept the Ottoman navy at bay. The defenders repelled assault after assault, repairing the damage done by the massive cannon each night. Giustiniani was a whirlwind of energy. directing the defense with skill and ferocity. But Mehmed was relentless. In a stroke of genius, he ordered his ships to be dragged overland on greased logs, bypassing the chain and launching a two-front attack. The defenders were stretched to the breaking point, their numbers dwindling with each passing day. Then, on the night of May 28th, a strange and ominous event occurred. According to legend, the full moon rose over the city, but then began to vanish, consumed by a deep, blood-red shadow. A lunar eclipse plunged the city into darkness. To the defenders, it was the worst possible omen. The city's most sacred relic, the Hagia icon of the Virgin Mary, was paraded through the streets, but it slipped from its platform and crashed to the ground. As the priests tried to lift it, a sudden and violent thunderstorm erupted, drenching the city. It seemed as if God himself had turned his back on Constantinople. Mehmed saw his moment. He announced a final, all-out assault for the early hours of May 29th. The attack began under the cover of darkness, with waves of irregulars and conscripts sent to wear down the defenders. Then came the Anatolian troops, and finally, the elite Janissaries. The battle reached a fever pitch at the Romanos' gate, where Giustiniani and his men fought like demons. But then, tragedy struck. Giustiniani was severely wounded, perhaps by a stray cannonball or crossbow bolt. Against the emperor's pleas, he demanded to be carried from the walls to seek treatment. His Genoese soldiers, seeing their leader fall, began to lose heart and followed him. In the chaos and confusion, a small gate used for sorties, the Kirkaporta, was left open. A group of Janissaries surged through this unexpected breach and raised the Ottoman flag on a tower inside the walls. Panic spread like wildfire through the Christian ranks. The defense collapsed. Seeing that the end had come, the Emperor Constantine, the 11th Palaiologos, knew his duty. He cast aside his imperial purple regalia, drew his sword, and with a handful of his most loyal guards, charged into the oncoming tide of Janissaries. He was never seen again, becoming a ghost emperor, a legend lost to the dust and blood of his final stand. The sun rose on a city of ghosts. The sack of Constantinople that followed was one of the most brutal in history, lasting 3 days. The great cathedral of Hagia Sophia, the spiritual heart of Christendom for 1,000 years, saw its doors battered down. The last mass being celebrated within was interrupted as worshippers were slaughtered or enslaved. The mosaics of Christ and the saints were covered in plaster, and the building was consecrated as a mosque. The echoes of the chanting priests were replaced by the call to prayer. The world had irrevocably changed. The fall of the city sent shockwaves across the globe. For Europe, it was a terrifying wake-up call. The Ottoman Empire was now a dominant power, controlling the trade routes to the east. This catastrophe would eventually force European nations to seek new sea routes, leading to the age of exploration and the discovery of the Americas. For the Islamic world, it was a moment of supreme triumph, the fulfillment of a prophecy. For scholars, it was a tragedy that sent a flood of Greek texts and learned men fleeing to the West, fueling the fires of the Renaissance. The fall of Constantinople was not merely the conquest of a city. It was the event that shattered the old world order and set in motion the forces that would shape our modern era. The echoes of that final, fateful Tuesday in May still resonate today, a permanent scar on the timeline of humanity.